I'm James Manning III, and this is History and Whatevea. And today my guest is James Blame Dunheim. Is that right, Dunheim?
No, it's not right at all.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, no.
Correct me.
It's James Blame Duhame.
Duhame.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty butchered. Sorry.
No, that's okay. We're going to butcher the entire hour, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Well, this is an hour of power of butchery, because there's a lot of butchery that happens within today's subject. So today, I asked Blame to come over, and as that is his stage name and what I seem to call him all the time, to talk about Marcus Licinius Crassus.
Yes.
So if some folks out there aren't familiar with Crassus, maybe you've heard a few of these terms, like the Parthian shot, or rich as Crassus, or Croesus, some say. I don't know how they pronounce it, but Crassus is what I hear most. This guy, when you look in history, James, two Jameses on here, this is going to be great. I mean, we've never really go anywhere where there's less than two Jameses anyway. But, you know, when you're looking at history, most of the time I want to pay tribute to those in the past. You know, I want to learn lessons. And then when you're talking about making jokes about people, you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to, I don't know who's a good subject for that. And then I was like, you know what, if we're going to make fun of somebody, let's choose the Rome's original rich slumlord asshole.
Well, he's been dead for over 2,000 years, so it's not too early.
Well, you know, yeah, I guess any jokes we make are right on time for that. But he's kind of one of these guys who did well, like, early on, but later on he just really screwed up bad. So, I don't know, let's see here. Crassus was born 115 BC.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
In modern-day Spain.
Mm-hmm.
He was a plebeian. Hey, there's the buzzer.
Oh, cool.
Dun 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 dun.
And I think Spain was called Iberia back then, I believe. I'm not sure.
Iberia.
I believe that's what it was referred to back in Roman times. It was not referred to as Spain. Right.
Well, the progression of that came later. And a lot of the region that we're going to be talking about is called Hispania. So it has something to do with that. But also, I would like to point out that James Manning III and James Blame are comedians. We are not historians. And we're sitting here and we're roasting and we're boasting and we're drinking beers. So this is going to be fun. You know, I'm going to try to guide us through this. And then by the end, I'm going to guide you, sir. I'm going to guide you. All right. Yes, speaking of guidance. All right, so Crassus's father, whose name was Publius. All right. And
Publius? Seriously?
Yes, he named his son after his father, Publius, which is going to get confusing later. But yeah, so it would have been Publius Licinius Crassus. And he was elected to the Council of Rome, or not to the council, as consul of Rome in 19... Okay, I need to take a swig of the beer here. 97 BC. I'm trying to say 1997 BC. In 97 BC. So he's born into like a senatorial class, you know, and he's pretty close with his father from what I understand. And his father had some success too, because by 93 BC, he was granted a triumph. So his father had, you know, if you're granted a triumph, you've done some pretty good conquest. You know, he's in a good family. He's set up, right?
It sounds like he was really set up. Like, you know, like his dad was making bank and really taught him how to screw people over.
That is exactly what happened. I believe. That because he like worked really closely with his father for the whole time when he was growing up. And he had two other brothers, one that died like really early, and they're not really sure what.
I wonder how that happened.
It could have been anything. It might have been Crassus. It might have been bears. It could have been dysentery. Back.
Could have been an inheritance issue. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, right? Because let's see here. By 83 BC, Publius is killed because Gaius Marius comes to power in Rome. And also, his other brother died at that point. They both got caught up in the prescriptions and all of that was happening when Gaius Marius took control of Rome. Well, what happened was he fled. So,
which person fled?
Marcus Crassus, the man of the hour.
Oh, okay.
So
he got the hell out of there because his family was getting slaughtered. He's like,
yeah,
it's time to fucking make haste over to Sicily or some shit.
Yeah, so he took off, and let me see here, where he went and hid for a while. He went and found a cave.
Smart man.
Yeah, he brought, so his brother who died, he took his wife and made him his wife, which is a little unusual, but it wasn't unheard of from what I can gather. And he was like, you come with me. And he took like 10 slaves or something. Because in this time...
Is that all 10?
Yeah, that's all he could gather to carry his shit. And probably, they were probably...
You need at least 10. Like 2 slaves, not enough. They're not going to get the job done. You got to bring 10 or more, right?
Give or take, 5 whatever slaves.
Honey, we're going to go move to a cave, but don't worry. I'm grabbing 10 slaves. We're going to be just fine in there.
Well, back in the day, they were like currency. If you had slaves, you had like something. And he also started off, and I don't know what happened, but he must have made off with it because they give us a lot of different calculations for how much money he had, but it wasn't at this time because at this point he was like 300 talents, I think, and maybe they say different things.
That still buys you a really nice cave. All right. I mean, 300 talents, you can get a nice cave on the Riviera in Spain. All right. So
yeah. He started off like super rich. Like he inherited whatever his brother and his father died. So he inherits all that shit. He rolls with 10 slaves, carrying all of his money, I suppose. And then there's some people who give it like they put a sesterces amount on it.
What the hell is that?
That was the currency of the time, sesterces.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
See, I'm learning here.
Well,
today.
that's the thing is the talents were talents of silver.
Yeah.
And you can look up a metric for that with talents of silver. And but I'm not exactly sure, like at the point of going to the cave. And you know what? It did buy him a very good cave because apparently it was a cave that faced the ocean, and there was lots of It was lights. There was sun in there, and every day he was brought a meal by a slave who owned that land.
It's kind of like Mar-a-Lago. I get
it was like, oh no, I gotta spend 8 months in a spa.
Tough times. But
only 10 slaves.
But it sounds like he did lose some family and almost lost his ass there.
He did almost lose his ass. That is for sure. Yeah, they want to give him like the greatest number of sesterces that he started out with was 10 million.
That sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it could have been 7 million,
It still sounds like a lot.
Yeah. Well, if you think about this, like what like a worker would bring home, they say would be like 1,000 sterces a year. And then if you... Yeah, let me see here. To be a senator, it was like 1 million sesterces.
How much do strippers get? How many sterces does a stripper get in ancient Rome?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question.
Hopefully you research that.
Well, the thing is sesterces are coins, so I don't know. I don't think that strippers existed, because if you wanted someone to dance for you, you could just go buy a whole stripper. You could just make them. Anyway, let's move on.
Slaves.
We were talking about sesterces here.
It was slave stripping pretty much back then.
Yeah, there was no rules when it came to that either. So he's in this cave. He's there. He's doing 8 months.
Counting his sesterces.
So he's starting off with like a meager fortune. Okay, we'll just call it meager. Right. Senators need 1 million sesterces. He's got 7. So he's like, and he finds his way out of the cave, from what I understand, because Sulla hits the map. So Sulla has risen this army, and he's challenging Marius. All right? And then here comes Crassus. He decides that he's going to raise his own army. One of his famous sayings is like, well, how could you be a true rich guy if you don't raise your own army, right? That's exactly what he said. No, it's not. But but that was kind of the gist of it. He was like, I'm just going to raise my own army, and go and assist Sulla so that he could get back into Rome. That was really his thing. So
where is this Sulla individual from? Where's this happening?
Well, Sulla.
Well,
that's just how the guy who I listened to the course on pronounced it, because he's Irish. I want to say this is a battle for Rome. I could
it's
look
probably
it up.
one of the civil wars.
It is
civil wars that they had. They had a shitload of civil wars. It's hard to keep track of them all. But there was one of the things about back in those days that's different from today is when you were a rich mofo, if you wanted power, you actually had to fight in the battles. You didn't just sit back and say, okay, my army's going to go kick your army's ass. You had to go with your army, pull your sword out, and get bloody. So as much as this guy Crassus was kind of an assius from what I could gather, I got to give him some props. It does take some kahunas to march on in with your own army at your own peril. Whereas today's politicians just sit back in an office somewhere and say, oh, shit, we lost. What a bummer. I'm going to go back to Mar-a-Lago now, or wherever that's just one example, wherever their island is. And they don't have to pay any consequence for those decisions.
Oh, no. And you see, none of those people, there are some people with a personal army, but most of the time, that's not them. They're just pawns, And I'm going to have to agree with you. In those days, there weren't any guns, and you had to walk up to somebody and put a giant piece of steel in them.
Close and personal,
and look them right in the eye and be like, yep, it's your time.
Yeah, when I think about that, that's one of the things that just fascinates me about that time. And you just pointed out another big difference back then, which is it was so up close and personal. I mean, man, there's just no way getting around the brutality of the situation. And it's just hard for me to wrap my mind around, putting on a sword, grabbing your spear, and going and shoving it into someone else's body, trying to kill them. I don't know. It doesn't get any crazier than that for me. I don't know about y'all out there in podcast land.
Well, I mean, that's something that I think a lot of times people forget is like in our time, in this last 100 years, where it's just about anybody who's still like remembers anything from back then, it was just a different landscape. And we're only talking about 100 years. The progression that happened in these ancient times, I mean, was real slow. And
comparatively, yes.
And the type of technological advance that you have can be the structure and training of your troops. So in these times, Rome was learning how to do this shit, So Crassus he was bold about this, and he had money. He had a meager 7 million sesterces and 300 talents. He's like, I can raise an army. And he was good, because what happened was he showed up while Sulla was fighting in Rome. This is one of the civil wars. You're absolutely right. Yeah. It was, and Sulla was about to lose, it looked like. But through good commandership, Crassus was able to save the day by commanding his right flank to give them a chance to recuperate. And he was in with Sulla at that point, because they won the battle, and one thing led to another, and they were back in Rome. And Sulla was the first real emperor, because what they were doing at that time was totally illegal. Sulla just took his legions that he was in command of and marched on Rome. And you're not allowed to do that, nor are you allowed to raise legions without Imperium, or whatever they called it.
Right, so this kind of marked the end of the Republic and the beginning of emperors for Rome after this event.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, because Sulla just, he kind of ruled for a certain number of years, and, Pompey starts showing up at this point because he's already in command of certain things. Let me see.
It's just a tremendous amount of power jockeying, from this period all the way through. Well, I mean, you could say that about just about any period of Rome, but the amount of power jockeying during this time frame is just unbelievable. I mean, we're talking about a soap opera on the scale of Days of Our Lives here, only with a lot more blood and gore,
Oh.
Right.
Well, and Sulla was very good at this soap opera. He was probably the best. And I don't know how he did it, but he was like one of the only, I think he was the only emperor who wasn't shivved to death in front of everyone, because that was the norm.
Something.
Well, it's because the guy was a true man of the people, and he retired to raise cabbages or something. He was like, I'm done. I'm not gonna. Yeah, he didn't call himself emperor. He called him something equates to man of the people or something, best man of the people or something like that.
Meanwhile, Crassus
is
burning people's houses down, and then offered them a shitty offer to take their house away from them, and just becoming one of the richest people Rome ever saw, perhaps the world has ever seen.
So this is how it starts. All right. So you got Sulla in power, and he starts what? Prescriptions. So prescriptions back in the day is I'm going to put your name on this list, and anybody on this list dies, and the state inherits all of your property.
Yeah.
So what happened was this is where Crassus goes from being a really kind of cool character who's kind of badass, to obviously this guy's a piece of shit, because
so Crassus turns into an Assius
right now, because there's things from the ancient writings and stuff, mostly Plutarch, but he said things that he even prescribed people that had nothing to do with it, and just because he wanted their villa.
I mean, it doesn't get much crueler.
Yeah, he didn't even ask Sulla.
Yeah, I'm going to put some people on the list. We're going to go kill them, and then we're going to take all their shit.
Yeah, and there were people who he killed specifically because he liked their property. They had not.
Absolutely.
He just decided that that's how it was going to be, and then because he has still a wide, he made money in a lot of different ways. Now this guy. He is a true Roman psychopath. This guy just loved money. He was so greedy.
Yeah.
He had multiple ways of generating money. So one of them is he activates these prescriptions, and the ones that are, they were with Marius, they all got prescribed. But what did he do? He went at auction. He bought up almost all of the properties at which were prescribed.
Of course.
And then he sold them at an incredible markup. Like, he marked them up good and sold them to people. And he made tons of money. He also bought, like, broken down structures or whatever that need repair. And he trained his slaves to be skilled craftsmen to repair these buildings.
Repair them. Like, those were some of the ones he would actually set their houses on fire.
We're getting on that.
Yeah. I mean, this guy was a serious piece of work. Basically, he figured out every kind of way he could steal your shit. And what a scumbag the guy turned into. Yeah, he was not really a people's politician.
Well, and that's the crazy thing, right? Like, this guy, one of the courses that I listened to refers to him as being the inventor of a rent-a-slave business. Like, seriously, he trained...
Whoa, rent-a-slave?
Yes, I know. And the context of which we say slave, obviously, I just want to bring this in, because back then, if you weren't killed in battle and they kept you prisoner, you're now a slave because you're already dead. So it could be anyone from any place that lost to Rome. It could happen to anyone.
And then did they like have a stone tablet app that you could access to get your rent-a-slave? Like, you could go, to the stone tablet app and, hey, I need a slave.
1-800
I got slave. I've got some field to plow up. I need a rent-a-slave.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, hey, I need to till these things. Oh, my house, I need repairs. Oh, well, we have someone who knows how to do that.
It's kind of like a temporary service nowadays that was occurring 2,500 years ago.
Well, this guy was like a true entrepreneur, and he just spent his time figuring out how to make more money and fuck over anybody he could.
I think you need to quantify that statement. He was a true entrepreneur / criminal who was a maniacal, narcissistic maniac. I mean, there's just a little more adjective, descriptive things you could use to describe it. Yes, entrepreneur, sure. I agree. This guy knew all about money. He knew how to manipulate money. He was a very clever politician in particular. But yeah, I mean, not just an entrepreneur, pretty much a scumbag, sleazy stealer of people's houses. And he ruined a lot of people's lives while he enriched his own.
Oh, that was his whole game plan. And the thing is in ancient Rome, that wasn't illegal.
Oh, not at all.
That was like, oh, you're fucking smart.
Yeah. He was just better at it than everybody else. Not like,
oh, yeah.
I mean, they had a license to abuse people in Rome. And I don't know if you're going to get into some of the punishments they used.
No. But, I was going to go into...
that's a very dark corner. I don't even know if I want to go into.
Yeah, we're trying to stay close to Marcus Crassus in this case.
Yeah.
You are right, and that is an extremely interesting rabbit hole to go down, because what the fuck? Seriously. But no, where were we? Oh, yeah. Well, the way that this guy made money, and you talked about it, he was the original inventor, as far as anyone can tell, of a fire brigade. So this guy had 500 slaves that were devoted to putting out fires. However, there's a few things you have to put in context about these fires, right? So fires in Rome broke out all the time.
Yeah, it was a big problem.
It was like nightly. Every night there would be shit burning down. And why? Because a lot of these, they were built in these really shitty high-rise apartment buildings.
Right.
That were made of like wood.
A lot of
wood. So, yeah, and they're like cooking and shit. So, yeah, fires happen all the time. Because I can't imagine that the ancient people living in these apartments had like fire extinguishers or anything. They didn't have, maybe they had a bucket of water, but it probably wasn't full because they was drinking it. I don't know.
Well, not only that, they had a lot of people getting spanked up on lead-laced wine and whatever else they were smoking, frankincense and myrrh, right?
Oh, my God.
So you're going to have some fire accidents when that occurs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there are some fucked up people in the high-rise trying to cook their fucking snack after a long night of drinking. You know what I mean?
They just caught a rat, and they're going to cook that fucker up.
Right. So there's going to be some fires happening.
Yeah, because, like, the water is, like, not good. You know,
Yeah,
so
I mean,
you have to drink
the
wine.
water was lead-laced. They used pipes that were fucking lined with lead, so half the damn population was poisoned with lead. In fact, they say one of the reasons Roman leaders were so brutal was because of that. Like, they were so maniacal because half of them had lead poisoning and God knows what else they were putting into their systems. There was some weird shit going on back then, just like there is today.
Oh, yeah, it was wild shit back then, too, like, because nobody knew about anything. Yeah. But, yeah, so this dude, we haven't even got into that yet, like, how he utilized the fire brigade to make money. Crassus used to make money on these fires because he would go to these people whose building was burning down and say, hey, I've got a firefighting group here and we'll put your fire out, but, you know, you have to sell your business. You have to sell it to me.
You have to pretty much, like, liquidate your property to me for an exorbitantly small amount of money.
Yeah, you're going to have to sell it to me, or I let it burn to the ground. What do you think?
Right.
It's like,
what a choice.
Yeah, I guess I just give it to you for whatever price you'll give me, because you can't negotiate with that. It's like, no, it's worth this much. It's like, it's on fire, motherfucker. You're going to take the price I give to you, okay?
And this is the first recorded mafia activity in history.
Well, I mean, at this time, you basically have Rome is a giant mafia. Like,
exactly.
And, you know, there's neighboring mafias because there's no laws. Like, nobody can deal with them because, you know why? Military destruction dictates who's dictating and who's a slave.
There are a few laws, but they only apply to the commoners, as we say.
Yeah. Well, in this case, like in Rome specifically, I guess much like it is today, you have to own a certain amount of property and you have to have a certain amount of money. Like we were talking about earlier, you need $1 million sisters.
You need 1 million sisters.
You need 1 million sesterces to be a senator, and you need to hold so many villas. Like,
yeah. In order to even fit in, right, with the rest of the crowd, you got to be.
And that was one thing that this guy did. So, like, he was setting these fires. If he was prescribing people who he liked their villas, you bet your ass that he had a couple of slaves who loved to set fires, and he was like, go set that building on fire. He did. And then he was like, hey, your building's on fire. Would you like me to put it out for you?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's just like, you don't want your store to get broken into, do you? You know, you don't want to have that happen. Why don't you let us buy the store from you?
And then it's no big deal, right? Because he's got the store now. It's half burnt down, but whatever. He just goes in there with his skilled tradesmen and builds it back up, and boom. He pretty much owns most of Rome. And the interesting thing about this guy, and he's a true self-preservationist. Like, he has nothing in mind other than manipulating money in order to fit his power, because he like lent people money, and there's some sources that say that he lent at interest and some that say that he lent at no interest. But either way, in Rome, if you lend people money, they become your clientela. The more clientela you have, clients,
right?
The more clientela you have to your name, that people depend on you, the higher your status.
Oh, yeah.
So he would give money to fucking whoever because he's got tons of money.
I mean,
dude.
and with 500 slaves, just on his brigade, he had 500 slaves on his brigade. He probably had, like, as rich as he was, he probably had another 1,000 slaves.
This guy obviously used his slaves in a lot of ways, in any way, to make money. Especially, he also did find his way to owning some silver mines. Completely manned with slaves, which made him a lot of money. Okay, and also, so the next thing that happened is motherfucking Spartacus, right? So Spartacus, 73. Yes. Here we are. We're at 73 BC.
First of all, Spartacus was a bad mofo. Spartacus. That dude was a dude that you did not want to mess with.
Oh, yeah. Spartacus obviously was a badass character and led the slave revolt until, what is it, 71 BC?
Right. It was like 73 BC to 71 BC.
Yeah.
So for like 2 years, this guy breaks out of prison, goes and raises his own slave army, and then proceeds to kick Rome's ass up and down the entire peninsula. And he won some really significant battles before he was defeated. He really had some huge battles that he had a lot of success, and really caused Rome to cringe. They had to rearrange their entire array of forces because of one slave.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the crazy badass story, and it's Crassus who's credited with actually taking him down. But here's the deal. So in 73, he's made praetor of Rome, right?
Yeah.
So in 71, by 71, which is amazing. So that uprising of slaves lasted a few years.
Yes.
And or almost. And so the thing was, this was Crassus's chance at glory and gaining the triumph that his father once gained, and he was like, yeah, I'm killing Spartacus, I'm making it. Well, here's the thing is Pompey heard of what was going on, and he was bringing a certain amount of legions in on this fight, and he decisively made the killing blow on Spartacus's forces and stole all that sweet, sweet glory from Crassus. Marcus Crassus then fucking hated Pompey ever since.
They had egos.
Oh, big time. Because the deal is Pompey was granted the triumph because he was like a bigger rock star of the time. He had had more military triumphs. He had more conquering going on and gained more for Rome than, Crassus could ever want. And he just wanted his one triumph, but he was actually given like a much lesser award.
He got the bronze medal.
Yeah, it was the Oviedo or something like that. Ovatio. Oviedo.
Yeah, that's what they give losers.
Yeah, it was the participation trophy. Right. And then like how he dealt with that was he just decided that he would throw big lavish parties for himself. He's like, yes, I'm so glorious. And he fed everybody. He was like free food for everybody. And
it's ancient propaganda. Yes, I was the real victorious person in this conflict.
Yeah, hey, there's free food and drink, everybody. Do you want to come and celebrate how cool I am? People are like, fuck yeah.
No, I kind of was mistaken. I thought that Crassus was actually the one who finally got Spartacus, but I guess I was wrong on that.
Well, I guess the decisive blow against the armies was made by Pompey's legions that he rode up on. the battle.
You
And
know,
then Spartacus, I mean, the legend goes that he was actually executed, I guess according to Plutarch, by, Crassus actually killed Spartacus as
Right.
far as lore goes. But you know.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, it
well,
was
you
the
know what?
legions, so-
What was really not to get off of Crassus too much, but what's really inexplicable is Spartacus is up in the Alps, and he can cross the Alps and escape, and he decides to turn instead and commit suicide against these multiple legions of Romans. I would like to go back in time real quick and just talk to him about that decision. But Crassus did gain some glory from that battle. He actually he did, garner some glory, and these people were so power hungry, it's just off the scale, because Crassus is watching not only Pompey, like you say, Pompey was Rexar, guess who else? Caesar. So he's watching Caesar kick ass over in Iberia, and he's watching Pompey kick ass, and they're both making a lot of money because they're raiding all of these places and bringing back this stuff back to Rome. And Crassus is sitting there watching all that and saying, I need to get some of this.
Well, check it out. So I'm glad you brought that up, because Pompey stole his triumph. He wanted that triumph like his dad, but he didn't get it because Pompey stole it. But who he saw was making some noise. It was Julius Caesar.
Oh, yeah.
And so the deal is Julius Caesar was, okay, Pompey and Julius Caesar were two of the greatest military minds ever produced of the time. They were exceptional generals. And
they absolutely were.
And he was not a good general. He wasn't an exceptional general. He was like good enough. He was able
You're talking about Crassus?
Yeah, Crassus.
Yeah, he was not the rock star
he
that
knows.
The other two were.
He's the bank man. He's the money man. He wouldn't, if he saw the idea of a bank, he would have been like, oh, that's fucking great.
Sure.
But, he wasn't any good really as far as these two guys. And Julius Caesar had an issue, which was he didn't come from an exceptionally wealthy family.
Right.
And he had many debts. So when he came along, Crassus saw that he was going to oppose Pompey, and he knew that he couldn't beat Pompey, so he had already been defiled a bit and stolen from by Pompey.
There's
so what's he going to do?
there.
Are you going to kick Pompey's ass? No, you're going to kiss Pompey's ass, but you're going to give Julius Caesar all the money he needs. Oh, how much money you need? Oh, no problem. Yeah, cool. Yeah, go do your thing, man. Because he knows what's happening.
Let me just point out that in my humble opinion, when we're talking about these three, Crassus, Julius Caesar, and Pompey,
the triumvirate.
Julius Caesar is the GOAT, the Michael Jordan. He is the Michael Jordan of that group, okay? Because Julius Caesar was the most tactical, ruthless general that ever existed on the face of this planet, in my humble opinion. He was ruthless. And those other two guys, they never stood a chance against somebody like Julius Caesar. But Crassus had grandiose visions of accomplishing what Caesar was accomplishing, which is great wealth. I mean, it's not like he was going through Gaul and Spain and not acquiring huge wealth. And Crassus is watching that, and I think that sets up what happens later.
Oh, well, completely. Because that's the whole idea, is that I think at a certain level, Crassus knows that he's not the general that those two are. And he spends his time maneuvering power instead of soldiering, he spends his time figuring out how he can burn somebody's villa down or prescribe them or buy their shit or sell or trade or loan or do anything in order to make a buck. But he wasn't out there soldiering, like you pointed out earlier, where it's like you need to be out there riding your fucking horse and stabbing folks in the face.
Right.
It's just how it goes.
At that time, he wasn't soldiering.
No.
Later on, he did.
Well, okay. And I think that's where we're going with this, because we haven't even hit the most juicy part of this asshole's fucking life.
Oh, let's get to it.
Well, okay, so I said earlier, it's like the triumvirate, right? So
I call myself that sometimes when I'm alone looking in the mirror.
the triumvirate.
Just saying.
We
Actually, everyone should do that. Look in the mirror and call yourself triumvirate. It feels really good.
Yeah.
I would recommend it.
Yeah, and then look down at your Pompey.
Yeah,
And
grab your Pompey and hold on to it tight, all right?
Right,
Because
so
you're going to be triumvirate at any moment.
I'm going to have a great triumph into this tissue. Okay, so you got 70 BC. Crassus found Julius Caesar, lent him the money to go on campaign against the Gauls, and of course he's wildly successful. Or well, like it's fucked up, but he does it.
Good investment.
Yeah, totally. And so you've got Pompey and Crassus made as censor, I believe. So like they're you've got all these guys are being elected, and then at one point, 10 years later, after they've gone to power and they're all kind of taken over, like this is not a good transition to 10 years later.
After they've screwed millions of people over, killed thousands, all in the name of gaining wealth, lighting people's homes on fire and buying them. After all of that,
oh yeah, and
tell me
after
they got
Pompey
better.
like murdered like lots of
did they turn
Gauls
over
were-
a new leaf, James? After that, did they
No,
all
no.
did they all like turn the corner and become benevolent?
No, it was only Sulla who knew the true way.
Sulla had it down.
He
man.
did his rape and pilling and murdering, and then he was like cabbages.
Yeah, yeah. Crassus could have took a lesson from Sulla.
Yes, he was the only one who didn't die by knife.
There's a smart man.
Well,
right
we
there.
got Julius Caesar, we got Pompey, and we got Crassus. By 60 BC, they formed the first triumvirate of Rome, right?
Yes.
And they're all assigned their own little regions. So
Yes, they're one
Caesar
big happy
gets
family.
Gaul, Pompey gets Spain, or the place that is now Spain,
Right.
and Crassus gets Syria. And this is where the story turns, right? Because Crassus has got Syria, and
Right.
he's got to hold it. But check it out. By 55 BC, when this kind of whole event starts in Syria, where they start to go and where he starts to fuck up, he's like 60 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he'd spent a lot of time making money and not soldiering, and he's like 60 years old, and he decides that it's time to go and fuck around with the Parthians.
So he's like, Syria's not enough. I govern this entire region. I'm richer than any fucking buddy could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's not enough. I'm going to need more. Why? Because there's never enough, right?
Yeah, he's probably, at this point, he's got some 170 million sesterces.
Right. So he wants to invade Parthia so that he can go back to Rome.
He wants his motherfucking triumph.
Yeah.
He wants his motherfucking triumph. I gotta do this.
His big victory that defines his legacy. And hey, when you want to define your legacy, a couple of maybe 10, 20,000, 30,000 people got to die. That's the deal. My legacy is more important than 30,000 other people's lives. I'm going to go ahead and just slaughter some people so that I can feel better about my whole position in history.
Well, it's funny that you say I'm going to go and slaughter some people, because like he did a good job in the beginning with the slaughtering.
Yeah, he invaded Parthia, right? And what does it tell you which year that was? Like when he invaded? Or it's okay if it doesn't. I'm just
the Battle of Carthia is said 53 BC.
So that's correct. That's the main battle. So, for those of you out there listening to this podcast, Parthia is modern day Ukraine. All right. That's exact. That's an exact kind of thing. You have this gigantic juggernaut of an empire saying, we're going to come in and kick your ass. And then Parthia is like Ukraine. And they're like, I don't fucking think so.
Well, it's that's very interesting that you say so, because I think you're about right. Well, except for
keep telling me I'm right, James. You could do that all night. By the way,
I love the comparison, really, because so this is the crazy thing about Crassus, right? This guy, obviously, his only goal is military glory, but
money.
Well, he's already conquered money.
Right. He was a guy who, some people are just interested in money and that's it. They don't, that's all far. Crassus was interested in money and power. And that's the power part of this story.
Yeah,
this is why.
He wanted the triumph. He wanted
the glory
before it was all over. But he had spent his whole life, instead of soldiering, he was a banker. He was making money off money.
Part. Yeah.
So, he had some successes, but he was nothing special. He certainly wasn't like the other two. But he got himself into this battle with the Parthians. And he had some success in the beginning because he went in and he fought some battles and he crushed them a little bit. And then he stopped and waited.
Right.
And it said that he personally oversaw the collection of like the monies and the loot. He personally oversaw that, which the ancient critics don't shed good light on this guy for this. They usually criticize him because if he would have continued the pursuit instead of stopping battle for until springtime, because it became winter and people stopped fighting in winter.
That's typical back then.
But he didn't pursue the Parthians any further. He decided to stop and wait. And then he would pick up the campaign in the next season.
Yeah, when the season. And this points out the difference between Crassus and Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar would not have stopped. He would not have waited. And this is kind of like emphasizes the lack of tactical prowess that some of the other Roman generals who are more experienced in the battlefield would take. And even Pompey, in my opinion, was a much better commander than Crassus was.
Certainly. I mean, he was kind of a mediocre general around like these two fucking rock stars.
Well, I mean, if you look at his accomplishments, that I agree with you there. That bears it out. He didn't really. He was just not the general that these other two were.
Let's back this up a little bit. So, he had control of about 7 legions. Crassus did.
That's a lot of army.
That's 35,000 gladius wielding, fucking sword swinging, tower shield having.
Yeah. That is a fucking nightmare coming down the valley on your ass.
All right. Not only that, he had like 4,000 light cavalry. And he had another 1,000 pledged to him by Julius Caesar as a Gallic cavalry coming. And that's another reason why he wanted to wait until springtime.
I didn't know that.
It was because he had his son, Publius, who he named after his father.
Oh, my God.
Publius.
Why did he do that to his son?
Why would he do that to
Publius? Yeah. I thought that died with his dad. Oh, my God.
Nope, Publius. And he had the 1,000 Gallic cavalry, and that's another reason why he wanted to wait. but he was counting money mostly. But so
Yeah.
this gives him at the beginning of this campaign 40,000 troops strong.
And about 2,000 slaves. Right?
Behind him. I don't know. There's so many slaves. How many slaves?
Oh, it's just to support the army. I'm just saying for that kind of an army.
Actually, so they wouldn't be counted in this number. They this number is like, what is the estimate of fighting troops on the Roman side?
There's records of their caravans just to supply that type of army, and the caravans were huge too. We're talking about 5,000 people. Just to support an army of 30 to 40,000 like that.
And that was another reason why at the beginning of this campaign against the Parthians in the upcoming summer, or when it became time to fight again, he did make a good choice of choosing the route in which he approached. So he could have went towards the Armenians, and the Armenians would have added another significant amount of troops, like, another 40 or 50,000 troops possible from the Armenians.
Holy crap.
And he would have been like watered and fed and garrisoned along the way the whole time, right up into where he wanted to go. He chose not to do that because he's wanted his cojones bigger. He wanted to be a ball man. He wanted to be the guy. So he's like, no, I'm not using the Armenians. And he could have went another way that other generals used, that went up a river and then crossed at a point and attacked.
Right.
He was like, no, I don't want to do that, because he wanted to go through the desert, which was a shorter route.
Right.
It was a shorter route, so let's go through the desert. And, and this is where the plot thickens a little bit. So this guy gets a guide. Crassus gets a guide, an Arab guide, who's going to take him through the desert.
Which you needed in those days, because they didn't have really reliable maps.
Well, except for the fact is that he was on the payroll of the Parthians, and he led his troops way out into the fucking desert where they marched all day, and then he decided to start fighting them out there.
Right.
Because he fell for this trap. And now he's got all of his men in like one formation, and they've been marching all day through the desert, and they start getting attacked because they're shooting arrows at him and shit, and they're fighting. And actually, the legionaries are doing fine. But Crassus tells them, okay, what formation you guys are in now? We need to change that. We need to do the hollow square formation. So now imagine that you're getting these orders as a Roman legionary. You've been humping it all day through the fucking desert.
Right.
You're all tired. You're getting attacked. Oh, now it's a formation change. Okay. Well, the discipline of the Roman military shows at this point, because they do it and they start putting up a pretty stalwart fight against the Parthians.
Yeah, the army is actually better than its commander.
Yes. And had it been a Pompey or Julius Caesar, this would have been different, possibly. Because at what we're talking about right now...
I can guarantee you that it would have been different. And here's why I say that, if you'll allow me to...
yeah.
It would have been different because this is the classic overconfidence syndrome. General George Custer, he did the same exact thing. We got to get to the enemy before they get away. They're so inferior. They're just going to run away. We got to get them. We are so superior. And, if you look at history, Julius Caesar didn't make those kind of mistakes that is being made right here with this decision that you just mentioned of marching straight through the desert, because he was overconfident. He had no concept of somebody standing up to this army and actually defeating them. And he had good reason to believe that. I mean, the Roman army was, like you said, the legions performed very well during this conflict. They were just getting bad orders from the top. I mean, it's a classic mismanagement of resources.
There was something else too. Before this really all kicked off, the person in command of the Parthian forces sent an emissary and was like, because he really didn't want to fight the Romans. Like he knew what
exactly.
He knew what was going on, and he was like, this isn't good. We were been relatively peaceful, and we're like, we have our land, you have yours, and but this was Crassus.
Let's be friends.
Yeah, and he was like, hey, what's going on? Why are you guys doing this? What do you say we just call it cool or whatever? And then the Crassus's response was, yeah, well, I'll see you in your nation's capital. And then the emissary was like, haha, dude, there's no way you're doing that, because hair will grow on the palm of my hand before you see our nation's capital.
And there's nothing more scary than hair on the palm of someone's hand.
Well, I'm just saying that's like what happened, because he was being so overconfident in his skill.
Right.
And
I don't
think the Parthians knew better than you're not going to just waltz that far.
And I don't think Crassus really realized what the fuck he was getting himself into.
Not at all.
I don't think he had a good grasp of, well, first of all, the tactics he used against their army showed that he wasn't familiar with his opponent's tactics. He just was not familiar with it, because what the Parthians did during that battle, he didn't respond to it correctly. And that's really one of the biggest reasons that they lost that battle. So what am I talking about? The Parthians had a very mobile cavalry unit that was very adept at shooting arrows, and they would switch out their horses between runs, and they would just attack in wave after wave with fresh horses because they keep switching them out. And Crassus had never faced that ever in his military career, and he just didn't know how to deal with it.
Oh yeah. Well, and here's the other thing. So they had this light cavalry that was able to come in, shoot a bunch of them dead with arrows.
Yeah,
and the thing
was
is like they were really disturbed by how well the arrows were penetrating their armor, because they were like compound bows that were really powerful.
Yeah.
And that riding of horses, that is something like very swift, and they, did well. But here's the other thing. So these 1,000 Gallic cavalry that are inside this hollow square are at some point teased out of the square, because they like harass them, and then they go charging after him, and then of course it's a fucking trap, and this is where Publius dies, and they all fucking die.
His Crassus's son with the shitty name Publius.
Yeah. Well, so check this out, though.
He gets tricked basically.
Yes.
In that maneuver. And the way I understand it is the cavalry was protecting the flank, which is what they should do, and they fall for this classic military maneuver, which is attack and feint. And the feint being, you're feinting that you're getting your ass kicked, and what you're really doing is just drawing them away from this square where they have protection. And then they systematically surrounded the cavalry of Crassus, including his son, and slaughtered them one by one. And I've heard, and this is just rumor, that they dragged his son's ass up to the line to show Crassus his dead son after they killed him.
They put his head on a pike and brought it up there, and it said that Crassus dealt pretty well with it. He kept,
as well as you could.
Yeah,
right?
He kept giving orders and stuff. But at this point, when Publius dies, it's pretty apparent to everybody that the day is lost. And well, the thing is you've got 40,000 troops, but. And the Parthians are outnumbered with the troops that they have mustered. It was like 9,000 to 10,000 troops versus 40,000.
That just makes that all the more incredible, this victory by the Parthians.
Well, it's really incredible the kind of bullshit that you're hearing, because like that's what happened. Like, this guy was outnumbered, but he through really good tactics and generalship,
It's
he won the
Ukraine
day.
all over again, dude. I mean,
Booyah.
it is Ukraine all over again. And I hope that the outcome is Ukraine all over again, too, because not only do they rout the cavalry, they end up routing the entire Roman contingency in that battle, right?
Yeah, and I believe the general's name was Serenus of Parthian.
That's
Serenus.
a lot better than Publius.
Yeah, well, Publius is on a pike at this point.
Yeah, Publius is getting the drone view of the battlefield on the heightened pike stick.
He's in spirit mode.
Yeah, he's with his troops in spirit.
Well, okay, so things are going real bad. 4-1 outnumbers, and he's just kicking their ass. And you know what saves them? Is like nightfall. That's like the best that can happen for him because they hold out till nightfall. And of course, I'll bring this in for you. June 9th, 53 BC is when this really started,
That's when all the shit went down.
This is when the battle really started. And when night fell, you have a bunch of these wounded and dying men on the field, right? And
yes,
night falls, and Crassus knows that he's fucked. So he retreats, and then they're alerted to their retreat, by all these dying men on the field, like, don't leave us. They're all fucking, they boogie. Well, the thing is they didn't stop. They didn't stop them. The Parthians didn't stop them. They're like, go ahead. They fell back to Caria. That's what we're talking about. Caria.
Caria. Whatever. Tomato.
They fell back to Caria, where there's like a small garrison or whatever.
Yeah, there's like a town there that's garrison, and he limps back to the town.
Yeah.
Licking his wounds.
Yeah, and then they try to they send another emissary and they bring him to negotiate surrender because he's obviously fucked. Like he had reduced his 40,000 to like some scraggly number of 10,000 that are scattered everywhere and half dead and
just they
gone.
Got mauled.
Yeah, and that's like what he has left is like 10,000 men, and he's like facing the 9,000 that are still there. Well, the thing is like, so he had 9,000. So you have the bow horsemen who really kicked everybody's ass, and then you have 1,000 pack camels that were bringing his arrows. So that was another thing that Crassus didn't think about was the fact that he could have more arrows than he brought with him. Yeah. He had 1,000 pack camels bringing all the arrows. So anytime any of these archers ran out of arrows, they just grabbed more arrows. They always had arrows. So he was fucked on that thing too.
The Parthians had their shit together, basically.
Well, and they had these cataphracts that were like these heavily armored horsemen that hid how heavily armored they were.
It sounds like a health condition. I have cataphracts.
Cataphracts. Well, yeah, it was just like he did so well by hiding how much armor they had and hiding his numbers by his formations with his foot soldiers and stuff. Really good generalship. And just beat the fuck out of them. More arrows, nightfall, and then they go and he brings him back, and they're like, hey, we're going to negotiate your surrender now, and some sort of scuffle breaks out, and of course, he's dead. Okay? Dead. This is the end of Crassus.
There's varying stories on the end of Crassus.
There is. So, what have you heard?
Well, a bunch. The one you just mentioned.
The scuffle?
Yeah, the scuffle, and then he gets killed before. There's also a story where the Parthians capture him alive, and they pour molten gold down his throat, and then cut his head off and parade it through town, and then they take it to Armenia and have a big party with his head as part of this gigantic party. And then there's other stories too that he was just killed just unceremoniously. And it's hard to really figure out which one is true. But I just think the one with the molten gold down his throat because he's such a greedy pig is a fitting death for an asshole like Crassus.
Yeah, very, very dramatic. And it's to symbolize that, his avarice had no end. Like, after he had all the money he could accumulate, he wanted glory. And, he just wasn't up to being the general that he once maybe was when he should have been trying to, do some shit.
Well, and also what I like about that story is just the cautionary tale about greed. They're pouring molten gold down his throat. What good does that money do him when it's being poured down his throat? The ultimate, it's kind of like the ultimate, like, this is why greed doesn't mean anything. It's stupid. So that's the part of Crassus's whole, story that it resonates with me because the dude can't take any of it with him, right? He's going after all this glory. He's 60, whatever. Talk about Putin quantified in an ancient history kind of setting.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people, as I went through studies, compared Crassus to Donald Trump because Donald Trump started out with tons of money from his dad and these apartment buildings in the Bronx that was making tons of money. Like, if you've got tons of money, it's not that hard to turn it into even more tons of money if you're not a fucking dumbass. But it shows and I liked that comparison for Trump. I like Putin even more because he's trying to be oh, we're Russian, we'll destroy you, whatever. And then it's no, we're kind of kicking your ass. And he's conscribing his, he's drafting
Putin is
people.
A good parallel because it's the typical dictator who gets bigger than his britches are, just like Hitler did, and goes in and bites off more than he can chew. And when you look at Crassus, that's exactly what happened to Crassus. He bit off more than he could chew. He didn't know what the fuck he was doing, he didn't even know his opponent's tactics, so he didn't have a good wherewithal of how to even deal with who he's going to go try to fight. It's one of those classic examples of somebody who's just gotten used to getting their way their whole life, and they just think it's going to go their way because of their past experience. And that's Crassus is a prime example of, sooner or later you're going to get your ass handed to you. And he literally got not just his ass, he got his son's ass handed to him.
Oh, yeah.
Which is really man, dude.
Well, my question is so the strange thing about this guy that I came across was that he was in person very nice and giving and always polite. And he was also, he was just had sort of that renown to him. He'll burn your fucking building down, but he's really nice when. And I'm just kind of alleging that, that he burned buildings down because there's no evidence per se that he actually did, but are you kidding me? He did.
It's in the historical record.
If you got the only brigade in town that stops fires, I bet you started a few fires.
It just stands to reason. And not only that, the other information from that time that we have, other people were doing similar types of things during that time. So it's not like this was unheard of or anything. This guy was a typical power player in the Roman Empire. How did you get power? Well, you did shit like that. You gained wealth, property, and power. That's what it was all about. And it's not a far stretch at all to think that this guy would burn some people's houses down and then say, "Hey, man, you want us to put out the fire? We're gonna need your property and probably your daughter too." By the way,
well, that's part of the property, but it's just kind of this guy personifies these characters in our modern day that still exist, and it's just what.
Some things never change.
Yeah, well, I like the comparison to Putin a little bit more than to Trump because Trump is like a total dumbass. And there's probably another emperor that is closer to that. But Crassus is like more like a Putin who has it all,
I agree.
but he's really fucking it up.
Yeah,
You know, like
yeah,
he
yeah.
could have just not fucking started shit with the Parthians and lived out his whole life in fucking grandeur.
He absolutely could have.
Instead, he ruined and then, okay, so Publius is dead, Crassus is dead, and then whoever's left to get all that. You know, it's like, fuck, man.
Yeah, well, the void was just filled by other power brokers within the Roman.
It was just snapped up
within
just
the
that
Roman
quick.
Empire. But I'm sure that when Crassus died, Pompey was just like, that's another player off the chessboard. I don't have to fucking worry about.
Well, I think
right?
Pompey was actually, I'm not sure if he was dead by then or not, but that's how Julius Caesar came to be emperor and then get knifed himself, is because Pompey was already eliminated.
Yeah.
He was dead.
I'm not sure when all that happened. I know that Caesar kicked the shit out of Pompey over there, and
like he went on his
Armenia,
shit.
basically.
Yeah, he went on his shit and fucking lost. I'm not sure. Maybe we got to do another episode on Pompey, but Crassus is one of those characters in history that it's totally fine to make fun of that asshole. I think he seems like a total piece of shit and, a total money maneuver. And even though, like, his villa, though, they said that the villa that he lived in had one table and it was very modest. Very modest. But the people around there knew that behind there lived the man that owned most of Rome.
Yeah.
I think it's because that's how his father, Publius, brought him up, was that his father had money, but they didn't have an extravagant lifestyle because that's not how you fucking did it back then. Because, his father did it right and went militarily and gained his money. Crassus went the money route and ended up trying to get military glory.
And then fancied himself as a military.
Yeah, maybe he got a little bit of the lead poisoning. Who knows? I don't know. It's fucking drove him crazy. Did you drink a little too much seawater there, Crassus?
I'll tell you what, man. That is a string of bad decisions that cost him dearly. And if there's one thing about the story of Crassus, it's like, there's an asshole who actually got what he desered.
Yeah, he got gold poured down his fucking throat.
Well, then watching your son's head being paraded in front of you, I'm sure that gave him a great feeling of success.
Is it worse to have your head cut off yourself and gold poured down your throat? Allegedly, he probably just died at that scuffle, or in some mediocre manner, and then the same. But
let's get his spirit on here and ask his spirit how that felt.
Let's get the Ouija board out here and let's talk to Crassus.
Hey, Crassus, how's the gold?
Hey, we're joined right now by
the gold
Marcus
esophagus treatment.
Crassus. He's joining us from the afterlife. Yeah. He's here. He's several thousand years dead, but he's joining us on History and Whatevea.
Crassus, what the fuck happened?
Dude, do you know that you fucked up, right?
Crassus is not one of those people who would say, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't change a thing.
Did you know that?
No, I think he changed a few things.
You died in 53 BC or whatever, but, it's 2023 and two comedians named James are talking shit about you.
And it's been fun because it's one of the happier endings to an asshole who treated people horribly.
Actually, yeah. Yeah, hey, that's a good lesson to take. It's like, we could use a few more of these stories.
Some things really do work out well.
Every once in a while, things are good.
Thanks for having me on your podcast. It's been a lot of fun, and I love the discussion. It's been great, man. Thanks so much.
Oh, yeah. Hey, thank you for coming on and talking about this this asshole from the past hole.
Right on, brother.
Right. Hey, everybody. Hey, thanks for listening if you're still there. And yeah, I hope you tune in and go ahead and correct us at jm3e.pod@gmail.com. And I'll come back at the Bitch and Moan Report. Until then, this has been James Manning III and James Blame. And thanks for listening.